Okay, and then finally, al-ikhfa, don't worry about al-haqiqi. Those are just words to differentiate between ikhfa from noon sakin and mim sakin. So just memorize al-ikhfa. Of course, there's way too many letters for a lot of people to memorize. So again, just memorize it this way. Al-idhar, the throat letters. Hamza, ha, ayn, ha, ghayn, kha. Idgham, yarmalun. Iqlab, ba. And then ikhfa, we say baqi al-huruf, the rest of the letters. Okay, so that's the easiest way to memorize it. And then for ikhfa, it's the same thing as idgham. If you look in the mushaf, the noon sakina does not have anything over it, and the tanween is separated. Well, let me draw it more clear. Okay. The tanween is separated if you read out of the Uthmani mushaf. Okay. Yeah. So we went through makharij al-huruf, and it directly relates to ikhfa, because when you make ikhfa, you are moving your mouth or your tongue to the makhraj of the letter that comes out of the after the noon sakin or tanween. So when you have, for example, jannatun tajri. So jannatun tajri. So when let me circle it so you can see. So I'm making ikhfa between that ta and the next ta. Jannatun tajri. So there's a tanween on that ta, followed by ta. Ta is a letter of ikhfa, that's why I make ikhfa. And when we want to make ikhfa on ta, like I said, we move our tongue to the makhraj of that letter. So ta, we pronounce it, if you remember, the top of the tip of the tongue is touching the gum line. So that's where you're not putting complete pressure, but you're kind of getting ready to pronounce that letter. So jannatun tajri. So you can kind of feel your tongue barely touching that makhraj. Here we have more examples. So in kadhaba. Okay? So I'm making ikhfa on there's kaf that comes out of afternoon. Kaf is, again, if you go through the letters, it's a letter of ikhfa. That's why we make ikhfa. So I'm saying that, I'm repeating myself, just so you don't get confused between idgham and ikhfa, because the noon sakin and tanween, it's in the same form, where the noon doesn't have anything over it, or the tanween is separated. Okay? So when we pronounce in kadhaba, what am I doing? So remember, I said kaf is pronounced from the back part of your tongue is in between the soft and the hard palate. So when I say in kadhaba, I'm moving the back of my tongue in that makhraj, getting ready to pronounce kaf. So that's the idea of ikhfa. You're just constantly moving, like as soon as you come into that noon or tanween, say in kadhaba, you move to the next letter, in kadhaba. So you're basically hiding the noon or tanween from the next letter. Okay? That's why it's called ikhfa, to hide. Next example, yatiman fa'awa. Yatiman fa'awa. Okay? So fa, it sounds different than kaf, because it's in a different makhraj. So yatiman fa'awa. Remember the makhraj of fa? Fa is pronounced the edges of the top teeth are behind the bottom lip. Okay? So those are some examples of ikhfa. Those are light examples. I'm not going to go through all of them because of time, but these bottom examples, these are examples of heavy ikhfa. So there's a difference between light ikhfa and heavy ikhfa. So let me tell you the heavy letters real quick. So we have khussa, this is the acronym. Khussa, ضغط, قذ. Okay? Khussa, ضغط, قذ. This is Allah. So those are the 7 heavy letters. Khussa, ضغط, قذ. Okay? So when you have one of those heavy letters, or sorry, kha is not a letter of ikhfa. Ayn is not a letter of ikhfa, because remember, these letters come out of the throat. So kha, just ignore that. Sad, ضغط, qidh. Okay, so the 7 heavy letters were khussa daghtun qidh, but kha and ghain, because they're not letters, because they're letters of the throat, we don't make ikhfa, because remember we make idhar on that. So an'amta, right? Khussa daghtun qidh, daghtun. Oh, that's supposed to be a ayn. Sorry. Khussa daghtun qidh. Okay, so these examples, I'll give you a couple examples. So وَمَنْ ضَلَّ وَمَنْ ضَلَّ. So notice how I'm pronouncing the ikhfa, okay? وَمَنْ ضَلَّ. Where do we pronounce dad from again? Adna al-hafa, the back part of the sides of the tongue, placing pressure on the molar teeth, okay? So that's where I'm moving the tongue. وَمَنْ ضَلَّ. Okay? So that's why it sounds heavy, because the back of the tongue is raised, remember? So ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا is another example. Dha, where's dha pronounced from? The top part of the tip of the tongue is underneath the edges of the top teeth. Dha. Okay? ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا. So there's a lot of reciters, even like really good reciters, that cannot distinguish between light and heavy ikhfa. So I want to make this point clear, that there is a correct way to make ikhfa on when there's a heavy letter. Okay? So you don't say وَمَنْ ضَلَّ. It just doesn't sound right. So you say وَمَنْ ضَلَّ ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا مِنْ قَبْلِ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا. So for every example, I'm just moving to the letter that comes after the nun sakina or tanween. So that's a summarized version of the rules of nun sakina and tanween. I tried to not go too in depth, but to try to provide enough examples where you can understand it. So inshallah that was helpful. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.